What's going on, everybody? After day one of the NFL draft, the Pittsburgh Steelers do have a new member. It's Troy Fautanu out of Washington, the offensive tackle. Alan, I think this is our reaction to it, but I think you and I would agree, pretty obvious fit for the Steelers, but I didn't think he'd be there. So this is a really good value pick for them.
Yeah, man, I think when you and I were kind of doing our pre-first round work, it was like, okay, we think it's going to be either Mims or Barton that are most likely to be there at 20. It turned out Mims was not there, went to the Cincinnati Bengals at pick 18. And I think Troy Fautanu was the player that fell down the board when other guys went up. J.C. Latham went way earlier than I think anybody thought. Joe Alt even went earlier than I think most people thought. The tackles were a little bit elevated early, but then Fautanu was the guy that was falling down. I think the knee issues, the medical issues, probably a part of that. Omar Khan was saying the Steelers had him very high on their board. In the top 10, I believe the Steelers had on their board, and they were just waiting and hoping that he would fall to them. He did. I think once, we saw the way the board was breaking down, I thought after really Cincinnati took Mims, he was then the next best player available. The Rams went with a defensive player. The Steelers got to be the beneficiaries, and I think this is as good of a result as the Steelers really could have hoped for.
I think the board and how it fell, we just Fautanu aside. Barton was there. Brian Thomas was there. Both corners, Quinyon Mitchell and Terry Arnold, were there. They had five.
And Cooper DeJean.
Yeah, they had a legitimate, ransom of guys that they could have picked. But Fautanu, to me, in terms of what they needed, his scheme fit, I think it was just a perfect fit. You talk about a plug-and-play offensive lineman that is tailor-made to play in Arthur Smith's scheme. I mean, this guy's an athletic player that played in space. I think that's something I picked up on with Mike Tomlin. Talk about how he played in space, the screen game. These are very important things to Arthur Smith's scheme. I think Fautanu really accentuates what he does well. So whether he plays at left or right tackle, I think he really is a game changer. In terms of the outside there at tackle, I think he's a great pass protector on top of that. But what I think is unique about Fautanu compared to anyone else in this tackle class to me is the combination of athleticism and nastiness. I don't think there's really anyone else, maybe outside Taliesin Fuaga, who obviously went 6 picks before the Steelers, they really can boast that. So getting him, I think, is really a nice marriage of, okay, the athleticism, Arthur Smith, the ones, and the nastiness, kind of this berry of wills that you want, Andy Weidel and Mike Tomlin have talked about. I think it's just a perfect culture fit. So I think he's going to fit in here extremely well with the Steelers. He starts day one. I don't think this is a question. This isn't a Marius Mims where maybe you have to ease him in there and Dan Moore starts. I expect Troy Fautanu to start week one.
I think he'll start at right tackle and move Brotherton to left tackle. He's a little bit short. I think that is the one maybe downside to him is he's shorter than most. I think you'd prefer to keep a shorter guy on the right side where maybe you're not going to deal with as many of the top edge rushers, although there are certainly a lot like TJ Watt that do play over there. But I think he's a guy that in his experience, it's like he's a guy that was projected to be, maybe he could be a guard, maybe he could be a center. And he didn't play, he did play some guard, but it's not like he was playing all over the field at Washington. He was playing left tackle. You make the projection because you see an incredible athlete that can move well enough to play any position, that is big enough to play any position. And so then why not? I think people have the wrong idea about the way offensive linemen move. It's not whether you should or should not move. It's whether you can or cannot play a position. And there are some guys that just, you look at them like Graham Barton, for example, played left tackle at Duke, is not going to be a left tackle and probably not going to be a tackle in the NFL. Troy Fautanu played left tackle at Washington. I don't think he's going to be a left tackle. And, of course, Washington had a left-handed quarterback, so he was playing the non-blind side to begin with. But I think he played right tackle. I think he played guard or center, too. And the Steelers are going to try him at right tackle. That's the right thing to do for a rookie, to give him the smallest change that you can. But if down, say they can't retain James Daniels and they want to move him to guard, I think that's an option. Whatever the plan at center is, and I guess we should probably address that at some point. If that doesn't work, you could move him to center. So I think it's a good player that just projects to be a really good offensive lineman wherever he plays. I have no concerns about the fit anywhere.
Yeah, and I'm very optimistic that he sticks at tackle because the athleticism is special. I'm telling you, this is one of the most special athletes I have seen in recent years come out at the offensive line position. But some teams are going to be scared because he's not the tallest guy in the world.
He's not tall, but he has long arms.
Yeah, he's got long. It's a very odd body type. You don't really see a ton of guys.
And really, though, when you talk about length of the tackle position, that's what you want. You want to be able to keep guys away from you, keep them off your chest. It doesn't really matter how physically tall you are. In fact, if you were going to build create a player offensive lineman, like I think you would actually want like a shorter, longer armed guy.
Yeah.
Like it gives you better leverage in the run game. It's easier for a very short quarterback to see over you. Like there are some advantages to that combination.
I do find it interesting too, because we talk about which tackle spot he's going to kind of go towards. You kind of look where Russell Wilson kind of drifts in his pressure, it's always to the right side. So you're going to have your better pass protecting lineman more than likely on the right side, which is correct because Broderick Jones, that's where he struggles. He had a little bit of struggles at the right side last year, and he'll get to move back to his natural spot. I think that's the right thing to do, and the reason why I think it's the right thing to do is because Fautanu, as we said, is plug and play, can go wherever, great hands, protects the outside shoulder. I think that the fact that he protects the outside shoulder a lot is another thing why I'm really optimistic he sticks there at right tackle or left tackle, whichever one they put him at. But the reason I think it's best to put Broderick Jones at left is that's the raw of the two guys. So you want him being as comfortable as possible, learning the technique as much as possible. So I would like to see that. I think, though, this is just a great pick for them. Value-wise, positional need, he's an immediate upgrade. I mean, honestly, by the end of his rookie year, I think Fautanu might be the best offensive lineman on this team.
He reminds me of the tackle version of Isaac Seumalo. It's very funny that Isaac Seumalo was the one Steeler that had reached out to him already, and it may have been more than that, but that was the one who he saw in the 13,000 text messages I'm sure he's gotten since being drafted. But I do think he is like the Isaac Seumalo of tackles. Like he's
very steady,
mean, but he's there are some guys that have that mean and nastiness, but they get out of control and they get out of themselves. And he has that sort of perfectly refined ability to just do his job. He does it violently, but he does it with an incredible amount of athleticism, but he's always doing his job. He's such a refined player. There's very little projection to seeing this guy being a very good NFL offensive lineman.
I agree. Very plug and play. I do think the aggressiveness gets the best of him sometimes. I think he had 4 or 5 penalties this past year. So it is a little bit of something that you look at, but I think Arthur Smith in this offense is willing to trade that off. I think now they're building a pretty nice offensive line to fit that between Broderick Jones, Isaac Seumalo, James Daniels, and Troy Fautanu. I think they have 4 of their 5. I think, as you mentioned,
so now what happens at center?
center.
Like, I mean, this was the thing. If you're a Steelers fan that has reservations about this pick, it's probably that voice in the back of your head that says, I like this guy, but what happens at center? Where do you see them going from here?
Yeah, well, Zach Frazier and Jackson Powers-Johnson both on the board. We saw Graham Barton come off a little later than we thought he would. Went off at 26th.
I had him going at 21. So
yeah, I mean, the kind of floated area of where he was going to come off the board was really between Seattle and Dallas, so he comes off a little bit later. I don't think he really kind of went under, but we've kind of heard all of these rumors about the center position and how it could go early. Well, I will say this. Carolina, who I think was one of the big kind of threats at 33, has traded up to 32 and got Xavier Legette. So you're not going to immediately see Jackson Powers-Johnson come off the board or Zach Frazier come off the board. What that means is, the Panthers who pick at 39, who I think are a real threat there, I think, you could look at, I think the Chargers are much less of a threat now, maybe with the alt pick, because they really need receiver
shift
help.
guys inside also.
But they really need, receiver help, right? So probably less likely, even though they do need a center after Corey Linsley retired. They signed Bradley Bozeman. Maybe they just work with him instead of just drafting Frazier or Powers-Johnson. But what it does, I think, is, I think the clear vision, at least for me, is a trade up here. I really do. Now, maybe Frazier or Powers-Johnson does fall to 51. We've seen Omar Khan. I think one of his greatest assets as general manager is he has a very good feel for what other teams think of other players, and he was able to stay at 20 and get Fautanu to follow him. We saw that last year where he just knew what was happening. Porter Jr., Benton, Washington, Herbig, all falling right into his lap. Could that happen again with Frazier at 51? I think Frazier is probably the likelier of the two to last because Powers-Johnson is just such physically gifted. But we've also know that the medical concerns with Jackson Powers-Johnson, concussion history, battled a few injuries, so who knows, maybe he ends up falling a little bit. And clearly, based on Fautanu, Washington, Corey Trice, a few of these guys. George Pickens. I don't think Omar Khan has much of a reservation as long as they're okay with the medicals of drafting a guy with some medical questions. So I really do think center has to be the pick here in the second round. They've talked about this bully ball run game. Great be up front. Well, the way to do that is fix center, and then you have 5 offensive linemen. And then I would also say this. I think it also points to a James Daniels extension coming this summer, because if you're going to want this group to be great, you're going to want to retain a pretty good guard, even if the market's kind of bursting. They have the cap room to do it, so you want to keep these guys together. So that would be 5 guys you would have, whether that's Frazier, Powers-Johnson. Add them to that 4. I think you have a really good offensive line. You can really start to kind of envision what the offense is. And then the other kind of question after that is going to be what happens at wide receiver.
Right, and of course, Brandon Ayuk and now Deebo Samuel added to the trade rumors, still swirling there. Cortland Sutton is someone that we've had connected to the Steelers. Maybe they make a trade for a veteran. There are still free agents out there at that position, though. I think that's the big difference between center and wide receiver, but I don't think there needs to be the same level of urgency. It's also a very deep class. Even if they wait until 84, 98, I think they're still getting a quality wide receiver in this draft, and then maybe they need to add to it with a trade or a free agent or something like that, but I think they'll be all right at wide receiver. The offensive line is going to be the heart of this offense. It is a running offense at its core. It also has two quarterbacks that were very highly sacked and very high fumblers over the last few years, so protecting them is going to be key. And I think it all starts with the offensive line. That's the vision of this franchise, and that's the vision that Omar Khan and Andy Weidel and Arthur Smith have been hired to implement, and I think that is the biggest reason why tackle makes a lot of sense, and I think that's why we're going to see center early tomorrow.
I do too. I think, protecting those guys, A-gap pressure is so dangerous for guys like Fields and Wilson too, so you need that center. And I think the good news is Powers, Johnson, and Frazier, even though they're going to be second-round picks more than likely, both plug-and-play guys. And so that's really what they need out of the offensive line. And Najee Harris, Jalen Warren, Cordero Patterson should also be pretty happy about what they're going to be able to do on the outside there on that wide zone scheme. So I think they're moving in the right direction here. I'm interested to kind of see how they attack the center position, whether they wait, trade up. And if they don't come out of round 2 with one, how desperate they get for Cedric Van Pran or whoever.
I mean, look, they brought in Hunter Norzad for a visit. Yeah. Bo Loomer's there. I think they have some options. They're not as high upside guys, but I think they are guys they get through a year with. We will see tomorrow. We've got more content coming here on the channel. We'll have the introductory press conference with Troy Fautanu at 4 p.m. At some point, we will be recording an episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive. Still not quite sure when that's happening with me and Zachary Smith. And then Smitty and Tyler and the guys from around the 412 will be having another live stream for the second and third rounds on Friday night, and then we'll be back here. We're in the Steelers indoor facility. It's very dark in the background. I'm sorry, you probably can't see, but we'll be back here late tomorrow night after the picks are done, and then again on Saturday. So make sure you hit that notification bell for all the new Steelers draft news. And follow myself, Saunders_PGH, and at Farabaugh FB on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and everywhere. And of course, the site Pittsburgh Steelers Now, SteelersNow.com, at PGH Steelers Now for all the Steelers draft news. For Nick Farabaugh, I'm Alan Saunders, wrapping things up here from the South Side on the first day of the 2024 NFL Draft. Troy Fautanu is a Steeler, and you should feel good about that. We'll see you tomorrow.